When was the last time you bought something expensive just to make yourself feel happy? Did you ask yourself whether you needed that thing? Did you question whether the purchase you made was a decision that you made, or whether it was suggested to you by an aggressive or even passive marketing effort that's been happening around you? Did you think that it would improve your life in any kind of way? Can you look at it now and claim that it did? I know I've been in this situation before, and I'm sure many others have too. It doesn't always make sense to purchase the stuff we do, but we do it anyway. We may do it because we subconsciously believe that they're a necessity, but in actual fact they're simply a desire that needs fulfilling, a desire that you may not have created yourself. Some products can have their aesthetic and functional appeal, but ultimately don't offer you anything new or life-changing. We just buy them because for at least one fleeting moment it makes us feel good to own something that we believe might make our lives better, even though that more than likely isn't the case. We are bombarded almost constantly by multi-million and sometimes billion-dollar ad campaigns, whether it's on the internet, television, streaming services, billboards, podcasts, influencers, sporting events, magazine, which still exist for some reason, and radio, among many other things. There's even talk of companies wanting to advertise in the very sky above us. A lot of it can be so subtle that you didn't even notice it, but subconsciously you did. The only time we seem immune to being sold something is in our sleep, but even then I'm sure some of us dream of a better life with more stuff in it. We live in a system that requires people to desire to want more, and since the cost of living is so astronomically high, people work more hours for less pay, producing more labor than ever, just for the chance of fulfilling those desires, and being able to do more than just being able to afford rent and eat, basic stuff to stay alive, which many people struggle to do. At its very essence, capitalism is a machine that requires people to be miserable and unfulfilled, all the while selling you the cure to the disease it created. It builds desire for consumer goods to improve one's lifestyle, while at the same time demanding they pay with their time, skill and labor for very little in return, or as George Carlin put it,
buying things. People spending money they don't have on things they don't need. Money they don't have on things they don't need.
It's kind of genius if you think about it, but it's also extraordinarily evil. In 2018, Queer Eye began airing on Netflix, a successor to the hit show Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, which aired on Bravo in 2003. Karamo Brown, Tan France, Bobby Burke, Anthony Porowski, and Jonathan Van Ness, otherwise known as the Fab Five, pay a visit to a person who's been nominated by loved ones to undergo a makeover of sorts, as it seems they were stuck in a rut or want a new beginning. I'm simplifying things for the sake of time here, but there are various other circumstances in which these people have been chosen. But the overall goal is for the Fab Five to look at this person's life and see what can be improved upon or changed entirely. The process usually goes like this. The Fab Five unexpectedly visit the chosen person at their house. I say unexpectedly, but there's already camera people inside their home. Reality television's weird. They give them an excited and warm welcome, then proceed to look through almost every corner of their house to figure out the kind of person that they're dealing with. This is followed by a brief conversation with them to get some idea of what they want out of this experience. Then over the space of several days the makeover commences, with each member of the team helping out in their area of expertise. Tan, the style expert, takes them clothes shopping, usually to a designer store, helping them find things that might be out of their comfort zone. Anthony, the food expert, shows them simple dishes that they can make regularly and are healthy and delicious. Jonathan gives them a haircut that's a new but familiar style and sometimes gives them a skincare routine. Side note, Jonathan, please cut my hair, it's so long right now. Karamo is the culture expert who has what is essentially a psychotherapy session with them, and Bobby, who is responsible for the makeover of their home. As you can see, these are all areas that most of us can safely say are important to us and are mindful of on a daily basis. These are the factors which encapsulate everyone's lifestyle. The people made over in Queer Eye may come from all walks of life, but all these areas are the things that unite them, regardless of race, gender, or ideology. We want to present ourselves the best we can to the world, eat better to live longer, become well adjusted, and live in a place that's not simply four walls and a roof over your head, but also an exhibit for who you are as a person. However, all these things aren't simply united solely by the fact that most of us consider them crucial. They are just as importantly united by this: they all cost money. The only exception to this might be if you live in a country with universal healthcare, but in the context of America where Queer Eye takes place, therapy is at a cost, with an average high of $156 per session. To get this out of the way, I love Queer Eye. I think it's a fun and at times inspirational show which has helped me become more mindful of my own behavior. The Fab Five all seem like genuinely wonderful people who care about the work that they're doing and the people that they're helping. And never have I seen anything that would imply that they're doing this show simply for a fat paycheck from Netflix. They've all undergone some struggle in their own personal lives and been very open about it, so they have some understanding of how difficult it can be for someone to pick themselves up when people keep kicking them down. As queer folk, they've had to endure serious hardships from institutions that have denied them the very right to exist and live as freely as cisgendered straight people. I commend them for how far they've come and the positive influence that they have on the people they help, and I won't lie when I say if I happened to be chosen by them for a makeover, I'd probably relish the opportunity. What I want to bring into question in this essay isn't the motivations of the Fab Five nor their credibility, but I want to look at how Queer Eye as a show projects the message that self-improvement is largely the product of consuming goods and services, and less so personal introspection and improving one's surroundings with the means available to them. I'll try my best not to sound so cynical, but it's hard to do when you're being critical of some of the nicest people on the planet. But bear in mind when I'm being critical of Queer Eye, it's not aimed directly at the Fab Five, but the show and its production. The majority of people at the Fab Five helping Queer Eye tend to fall into the category of working class to middle class, so their financial flexibility can vary, but not necessarily so much that it would alienate a larger audience. The only exception to this that I can think of offhand is the second episode of season 1, where they make over an app designer who is obviously quite wealthy, but because of how he presents himself, is not the kind of wealthy one would typically envision. Although there are many reality shows out there that serve as aspirational television, Queer Eye attempts to stay grounded by showing relatable people that aren't playing characters, as the show builds a narrative around them that has the goal of being inspirational. Regardless of their chosen person's wealth, Queer Eye paints an underdog story, someone who despite everything isn't being their best self. The person who nominated them cared enough about them to do so, and believed that they can be happier if they had help removing the obstacles which prevented them from progressing. Queer Eye does make a considerable effort to show the Fab Five having meaningful discussions with the people they're helping, and it's genuinely touching to see them open up to these kind-hearted folk that are helping them. And it's in these moments where the show truly shines. Unfortunately, almost everything outside of these moments paints a far more simplistic answer to their problems, and that answer is that they, and you, the viewer, can improve your life through buying things. A lot of things. Things that most of these people wouldn't be able to afford if the show wasn't footing the bill for them. Entire houses and apartments are completely refurbished with brand new furniture. Walls and ceilings get new coats of paint. Blemishes are fixed, electronics and appliances are replaced, and they're given a fully stocked new wardrobe along with high-end grooming products in the bathroom. Each home makeover they perform is easily in the range of tens of thousands of dollars, and that's even before taking into account a substantial cost of labor that an undertaking like this would require. Near the end of each episode of Queer Eye, the Fab Five reveal to their chosen person and the audience the extent of their home makeover, and this is presented as the most important overhaul this person has undergone during this process. And even though in most cases it is the most drastic change in their life, it's a change that wouldn't be attainable for the majority of them. Most of these people wouldn't be able to afford to change everything in their home in one fell swoop. But despite this, the show has an unfortunate insistence that this was necessary to the process. Changing your environment can be an important part of personal change. A comfort zone can be damaging in the long term if it doesn't allow for personal growth, especially if you're not willing to welcome people into it. The Fab Five want to renovate these people's comfort zones so they're spared the potential embarrassment and shame when they allow others into it, but the cost of doing so is excessive to say the least. A more reasonable and attainable alternative would be to take what this person already has and perhaps rearranging their belongings, along with a few improvements and fixes to create a more comfortable living space. but instead they're telling this person that what they've created over a period of years simply isn't acceptable, resulting in a complete overhaul, albeit with some of their past relics incorporated into the design. The same can be said for when Tan takes them clothes shopping. More often than not, it's a designer clothes store where a shirt can cost upwards of $700, but to his credit, Tan seems to have a better understanding of a person's budget, so when necessary he's shown them the kind of clothes that they can buy at a place like Target. It's processes like the home makeover and the designer clothes shopping that drastically alters the messaging behind Queer Eye as a show, where it deviates from being inspirational viewing to aspirational, telling audiences that in order to improve their lives, it requires a scorched earth campaign, replacing the old with the new whilst remembering the small things that make you, you. It's unattainable to the majority of people, and for a show that at its core has a positive and important message, it sets the admission cost for personal change absurdly high. There's one particular member of the Fab Five whose role is often overlooked and underused, but their work is arguably more important than anyone else in the group. Kurashu Brown, the show's culture expert. The title culture expert is an extremely ambiguous one and severely undersells the work that Kurashu does in the process. Unlike with the other members, Kurashu's goal isn't to bestow them with new belongings, but to simply talk to them and understand how they got to this point in their life. Listen to their fears, ask them for what they want from their future, and giving them the goals and hopefully changing their perspective on life so they can work on achieving personal growth and become better adjusted. For all intents and purposes, this is a psychotherapy session, and that's because, well, Kurashu Brown is a licensed psychotherapist and social worker. His title, Culture Expert, is a throwback to the original Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, where Jai Rodriguez held the same title, but he was a Broadway star, and the work he did on the show differed from what Kurashu does. Jai tended to help people open up more and ask them general questions about their lives. This approach has its value because many of the chosen people on Queer Eye and Queer Eye for the Straight Guy have problems opening up to others. Kurashu, on the other hand, has an understanding of the behaviors and patterns which the people he speaks to adopt. He attempts to make them mindful of these and offers them tools or coping mechanisms to help them manage, much like a psychotherapist would do. Kurashu is clearly very good at what he does, and it's safe to say that he genuinely cares about the people he interacts with on the show. He's even stated that he keeps in touch with every one of them for mini therapy sessions, and that it would be irresponsible of me to open up their emotional issues then leave them, a statement which is 100% correct. Psychotherapy is a very difficult process, one that requires opening up deep emotional wounds. To open those wounds only to leave a patient to deal with it on their own wouldn't be just irresponsible, but cruel. Within the context of the show, though, lies a problem. I mentioned earlier that Kurashu's role is arguably the most important, but the show doesn't portray it as such. The title Culture Expert is a misnomer, and not only is Brown aware of that, but he resents it, and we as an audience should be in agreement with him on this. I know I'm repeating myself here, but I think it's important to make it clear that Kurashu Brown is a licensed psychotherapist and social worker. And even though the title Culture Expert is in keeping with the show's predecessor, not only does it undermine the importance of Brown's role as a psychotherapist, but arguably the importance of psychotherapy in the show's process. The people the Fab Five help might not have mental illnesses. Statistically speaking, there's a good chance that some of them do. The circumstances they find themselves in are behaviors often found in people who have depression, anxiety, and a myriad of other conditions. But regardless of this, psychotherapy is still useful to those who don't have mental illness, and it's especially useful for people whom the Fab Five are helping, as it assists them in being introspective and helping them understand their behaviors, how to work on correcting them and being mindful of them on a daily basis. It really is a shame that the show doesn't place as much value on Kurashu's role as he does, and I would like to assume that the people he's helped have come to understand the value of mental health care. The major downfall to this though, and this isn't any fault of Kurashu, but unfortunately in many countries, the US especially, therapy and mental health care has something in common with the rest of the makeover. It's commodified, sold to people, just like hiring someone to paint your house or landscape your garden. The difference being is that the value of mental health care is incalculable next to these services, and something everyone could benefit from and many people require, And much like the other steps of the makeover, the availability and cost of such a thing is ignored. I'm just glad that Kurama has been kind enough to follow through with his initial sessions, because there's every chance that many of the people that they've helped might have struggled to afford therapy, or even not been able to find it. Many people on the show live in rural areas where access to mental health care can be non-existent. Queer Eye is a genuinely touching show with admirable goals. It doesn't directly try to sell you a product in particular, and it doesn't try to promote any one particular way of living. As far as I'm aware, they also haven't been destructive with the people they've helped. Shows like Extreme Home Makeover have ruined people's lives after they remodeled their homes to make it much larger, therefore increasing their property tax and tripling or in some cases quadrupling their utility bills, forcing them either to have to move or have banks foreclose on them for having their homes turned into mansions. The goal of Queer Eye is a noble one, and it has lessons that are valuable not just for the people they help, but for the audiences too. It's unfortunate that many of these lessons come with the caveat that bettering one's life must include a vast financial investment. Queer Eye isn't directly telling the audience that this is a requirement, but it also doesn't offer any real alternative to the average person who isn't able to afford an overhaul, or even pay for regular therapy. It's hard to pitch an alternative of what they currently do without potentially making it less entertaining. I doubt many people would want to watch a show where someone has a 50-minute therapy session while someone in their home cleans up the dishes that have stacked up in the sink, but for most people, that's reality. The need to make incremental changes while at the same time trying not to be overwhelmed by the stresses of modern life. And as all these small changes are occurring, we're still bombarded with media telling us that it's not good enough, and if we want a better life, it can only be achieved through consumption of goods. A better phone, a bigger house, a faster car, and whether it's intended or not, Queer Eye often reinforces this message by telling us that the soul can't truly heal while we're still surrounded by our past belongings. Thank you very much for watching. If you did like this video, then please consider subscribing to my channel. I'd really appreciate it. Of course, if you could drop a like and, maybe leave a comment, that would also be great too. If you did like this, then you might be interested in my other videos, which you should be able to see on the screen right now. But otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day and take care of yourself. Bye bye.